Are your blog post conclusions about as satisfying as a cliffhanger with no sequel? I've got you. In this video, I will spill the perfect formula for crafting conclusions that leave your readers wanting more. Just like a silly cat in front of a bowl of tuna.
Everything you need to easily pass English ATAR. English ATAR made simple. Powered by Saints Coaching.
This is the last lesson on interpretive texts. Well done for making it this far. We're looking at conclusions, aka the fifth and final section of your blog post. To be precise, we're focusing on two conclusions. One for each question that we planned for and analyzed introductions for. Relatedly, it's vital that you have watched the lessons and completed the activities for the previous 4 lessons. If you haven't, stop this video and make sure you've done that, please. If you've completed those other lessons, let's get stuck into this one. Shall we do a recap of the structure of section 5? I think we should. This recap is important because it'll lead us to our analysis of example 1. That analysis will consist of a recap of step 5 of the planning steps, then a quick recap of section 0 to 1, the headline and introduction. One more recap of sections 2 to 4, the body paragraphs, then we will take a look at section 5, the conclusion, the focus of this lesson. By the way, the recap of section 0 to 4 obviously won't involve me reading them out again. You've probably already figured that out based on the relatively short runtime for this video. We'll do a similar thing for example 2. Firstly, a quick recap of step 5 of the planning steps, then we'll recap section 0 to 1, the headline and introduction, then we'll go straight to analyzing the conclusion. Obviously, we didn't analyze any body paragraphs for example 2, so we'll go straight from introduction to conclusion. Only one more thing left to do after that. How precious. Let's get this show on the road. The structure of section 5, the conclusion, recap, our brilliant bottom funnel. If you've gotten to this stage, you may as well just finish it off. And you do that by doing 2 things. Firstly, you summarize the content of your blog post with section 5.1, the summary element. This is a few sentences that summarize the blog post's main ideas and a few key takeaways. The second thing you do is call the readers to action through section 5.2, the call to action. This is 1 to 4 sentences that refer back to the activate and call the readers to action. Nice and easy, just the 2 elements. Oh, and don't forget that you write a heading for the conclusion section. So 2 elements, summary, call to action, but we just like to use silly cat. Recap of the conclusion finished. Let's move on to our analysis of example 1, starting with a few recaps to get us there. No, I can't be bothered. Our greatest experiences are our quietest moments. Create an interpretive text in which you reflect on this quotation. Recap of the planning steps. Pause the video. Have a read of the following underlined elements. Pay attention to how those underlined elements appear in the following conclusion. Sections 0 to 1, the headline and the introduction. The headline of the blog is how I learned about privilege, preparation, and perseverance, and how you can too. Hopefully you can recall what it's about. These were the body paragraphs that we analyzed in relation to this example. Starting with main idea 1, it's all about the Philippines and privilege. Main idea number 2 talks about university and perseverance, and main idea number 3 talks about Sweden and preparation. If it's been more than 3 days since you watched the lesson and completed the activities in relation to the lesson on body paragraphs, go and skim through those body paragraphs once again, just so we'll be on the same page when we analyze this conclusion. Before we look at that conclusion, side note. This paragraph is obviously quite long. I said in a previous lesson that we will be addressing the length of this paragraph in the review lesson at the end of this module. While that is true and this paragraph does need to be shorter, I want to address something I think you've thought at least once over the last few lessons. Am I supposed to write as many words as you write for these example responses? The short answer is no, you don't have to write as much. Why not? Because I typed these responses under timed conditions and fixed some typos afterwards. All things being equal, it's unlikely you can write as much as I can type in the same amount of time. That checks out. Hopefully that addresses any concerns you had regarding the length of paragraphs like these. All in all, they're probably 10 to 20% longer than the ones that you would handwrite under exam conditions. With that being said, let's take a look at section 5, the conclusion. Original version. Deconstructed version. The heading, final thoughts. The body text. Today's post was inspired by Nishki's quote, "Our greatest experiences are our quietest moments." I felt compelled to dive deeper into its meaning by reflecting on my greatest experiences and the quietest moments that followed. I discussed my time in the Philippines and how I came to learn about my privilege as a result of it. I discussed my time at university and how it taught me the value of perseverance and made me grateful for what I'm doing today. Lastly, I discussed my time in Sweden and how I realized the importance of preparation. While these experiences are uniquely my own, I hope you can apply the following 3 key takeaways in your life. Number 1, if you're having a bad day, remember that it could always be a lot worse. Number 2, if you feel stuck doing something you don't want to, remember that the hard times make the good that much better. Number 3, if you're feeling helpless, take accountability and ask yourself, what could I do next time to avoid this situation? Moving to the CTA element. That's a wrap for today's post. As always, be sure to subscribe to the blog if you haven't already and check out the other posts on the site. Also, I'd love to get your thoughts on what the terms greatest experiences and quietest moments mean to you. Let me know in the comments below. That's our deconstructed version. These are our comments. Let's discuss the summary element first, starting with the heading. If you're lost for ideas for the heading of your blog post, consider using one of the following: final thoughts, summary, wrap up. Today's post was inspired by Nishki's quote, "Our greatest experiences are our quietest moments." I felt compelled to dive deeper into its meaning by reflecting on my greatest experiences and quietest moments that followed. These 2 sentences are the equivalent of me holding up a sign in capitalized letters that says, "Hey marker, I've answered the question." This second sentence refers back to my definition of each term in the quotation that I referred to in the introduction. Once again, by referring to content in the introduction, in our conclusion, we are creating a kind of circular structure in our blog post, ultimately enhancing the whole text's cohesiveness. Turning to another point, note the repetition of the phrase, "I discussed my time." Anaphora is the technique used. Repetition of this phrase indirectly refers to the term experiences in the question. In other words, repeating the words "my time" indicates that I have discussed experiences. Another really important point is that reusing keywords from the headings of your blog post are a really effective way of telling your reader you are summarizing it. Main idea number 1 was all about the Philippines and privilege, and here I am reusing those words, Philippines and privilege. Main idea number 2 was all about university and perseverance. In the paragraph, we can see university and perseverance. Main idea number 3 was all about Sweden and preparation. Here I'm using the words Sweden and preparation. You get the idea. This sentence tells the reader they can get value from my post, despite a big part of it just recounting my own personal experiences. That is the first paragraph of the summary element. Here is the second. We've got a numbered list to enumerate key takeaways as they had a set number. They have a set number because in the previous sentence I said, I hope you can apply the following 3 key takeaways in your life. So in this case, it made sense to use a numbered list instead of dot points. Then in the actual numbered list, 1 key takeaway is distilled from each main idea of the blog post. Importantly, the key takeaways replicate the sequencing of the main ideas. The first key takeaway relates to main idea number 1. The second key takeaway relates to main idea number 2. And the third key takeaway relates to main idea number 3. This is a really small thing to do, but just maintaining the same structure, order, sequencing throughout your blog post makes it easier for everyone to follow along with what you're saying. That's a discussion of the summary element. Let's talk about the call to action. The use of exclamation marks in the CTA element of the conclusion creates a bit of an uplifting and energetic tone. Over here, we can see I've reused the terms greatest experiences and quietest moments. This is a subtle way of telling the marker that I'm answering the question by reusing words within it. Another effective way of me telling the marker I'm engaging with the terms within this question is by actually incorporating those terms into my call to action to the reader. I'm asking them to let me know in the comments below what the terms greatest experiences and quietest moments from the question mean to them, hitting two birds with one stone. Let's discuss a bit more about the actual calls to action within this part of the conclusion. The first CTA is subscribe to the blog. The second CTA is check out the other posts on the site. And the third CTA is let me know in the comments below. All three of those CTAs are commonly used in the conclusions of blog posts, which is indirectly telling the marker, I understand the conventions of the form, the blog post. Example number 1, see you later. We will never be looking at that ever again. But we have to look at example 2 one more time. Actually, I think I lied. We are looking at example 1 in the review lesson. I apologize for that abuse of trust. Our question: compose an interpretive text to represent an encounter with a person who taught you something about yourself. Little recap of the planning steps, but just step 5. Skim over the following underlined elements. Take note of how they manifest in the conclusion that we're about to take a look at. Just in case you forgot, this is what section 0 to 1, the headline and the introduction, looked like from 2 lessons ago. The headline is "This encounter changed my life." Pause the video one more time and have a read of the headline and the introduction before we take a look at this conclusion. All right, let's do it. Section 5, the conclusion, the final paragraph we are looking at in this lesson. Original version, deconstructed version. The heading, summary, the body text. Today's post was about an encounter with a man called David and what he taught me about myself. I set the scene by depicting my life before meeting David, and as we saw, it was a mental mess. I then turned to my encounter with David and outlined what he taught me. Finally, I illustrated what my life has been like since the encounter. As you know, this blog is all about actionable takeaways. I don't want to leave you hanging with a random story about this guy called David. In that vein, here's a reminder of the lesson and some potential applications of it. That's the first paragraph of the summary section. Here is the second one. The lesson: you are not your mind. Potential applications. If you feel angry, remind yourself that you are not anger. You and the emotion of anger are separate things. If you feel sad, remember that you are not sadness. You and the emotion of sadness are separate things. If you feel frustrated, remember that you are not frustration. You and the emotion of frustration are separate things. Finally, here is the CTA, the call to action. Thanks a bunch for making it to the end of this post. I hope it has helped you reflect on your resilience and reminded you that you could do more than you think. If you liked this post, please subscribe to the blog if you haven't already, and let me know how you got through a hard time in the comments below. Until the next one. Well, that sounds familiar. That's the deconstructed version of the conclusion for example 2. Let's discuss some comments. Starting with the first element of the conclusion, the summary. This is a no BS summary and it provides a bit of an insight into my blog's style. In the first 4 sentences of the summary section, I summarize the main ideas that my blog post discussed. My reference to those 3 main ideas in the summary section is slightly more detailed than my introduction of those ideas in the introduction. This approach teases the reader in the introduction and then leaves them feeling satisfied in the conclusion. Turning to another point, this sentence, as you know, this blog is all about actionable takeaways, does a similar thing to the heading in that it provides a bit of an insight into my blog's style. It suggests that my posts are 2 things. Firstly, they're neatly structured. Secondly, my posts value practical tidbits of information over poetically written ambiguous sentences. The final part of this sentence, I don't want to leave you hanging with a random story about this guy called David. It implies that I've got the reader's best interests at heart and the post is about them and not me. Final part of this paragraph of the summary section. In that vein, here's a reminder of the lesson and some potential applications of it. This sentence reinforces the straightforward and matter-of-fact tone of the post. Turning to the final paragraph of the summary section. This dot point articulates the crux of the entire blog post. After this first sentence, I turn to potential applications of this overarching lesson. Note how, unlike the key takeaways in example 1, these key takeaways are not distilled from each main idea of the blog post. Rather, my takeaways refer to potential applications of that umbrella lesson. Each dot point does a few things. Firstly, they employ identical syntax, which also complements the post's matter-of-fact tone. Secondly, they refer to an emotion that the reader has undoubtedly experienced. Thirdly, they indirectly answer the question by explaining the application of an encounter with a person who taught me something about myself. That's the summary element. Here is the call to action. One more discussion to go, and then we're done. The first sentence is, "Thanks a bunch for making it to the end of this post." This sentence firstly acknowledges that the reader's time is finite, it's limited, it expresses gratitude, a great practice, and it creates a friendly voice. Turning to the next sentence, I hope it has helped you reflect on your resilience and reminded you that you could do more than you think. This sentence concludes the post on a positive note by empowering the reader. Let's hit the nail directly on the head and address what the call to action or call to actions are in this post. The first one is please subscribe to the blog if you haven't already. This last CTA creates a circular structure by alluding to the first sentence in the entire blog post in the introduction. Let me know how you got through a hard time in the comments below. It relates to this first sentence of the post. I'd like you to remember a time when you lacked hope, etc., enhancing the overall text's cohesiveness. Done. That's the last main topic in this lesson and the last main topic for interpretive texts. Pat on the back. Before we close, there is just one thing left to do. It is a simple summary. First main part of the lesson, the structure of section 5, the conclusion, we recapped it. Our mnemonic is silly cat. The S in the mnemonic stands for summary. The summary is a few sentences that summarize the blog post's main ideas and lists some key takeaways. The call to action is 1 to 4 sentences that refer back to the activate and call them to action. After we recapped the structure of section 5, we looked at example 1 and example 2. Here are some key takeaways about the elements of the conclusion in relation to our discussion of these examples. Starting with the summary. Consider using one of the following headings for the conclusion section of your blog post if you're lost for ideas. Final thoughts, summary, wrap up. Also, consider using the opening sentence to reinforce that you've answered the question. For example, today's post was inspired by Nishki's quote, "Our greatest experiences are our quietest moments." Additionally, reuse the terminology of the question in your conclusion to tell the marker you have answered it. Example, I felt compelled to dive deeper into its meaning by reflecting on my greatest experiences and the quietest moments that followed. Recall how I used similar terminology in this part of the summary that is in the actual question I'm answering. Next point, unlike a responding section essay, you can use explicit language for summarizing your blog post, such as here are the things you should know about what you just read. You can literally write that in your post. Also, consider using keywords from the headings of your blog post in your summary of it. For example, I discussed my time in the Philippines and how I came to learn about my privilege as a result of it. Recall the main idea for this example was Philippines and privilege. Here are a couple of tips to clearly communicate valuable information from your post to the reader in this section of the conclusion. Firstly, distill one key takeaway from each main idea. Secondly, ensure the key takeaways replicate the order of those main ideas. Another point, summarize the post's main ideas by providing slightly more detail than the outline in the introduction. One more takeaway for the summary element, try to make the reader feel you've got their best interests at heart and that the post is for them, not for you. For example, I don't want to leave you hanging with a random story about this guy called David. Okay, that is the summary element. Here's a few things we looked at regarding the call to action. First, consider using 1 to 2 exclamation marks in the CTA to end the text with an uplifting and energetic tone. Also, personalize the generic CTAs to suit the content of your blog post. If possible, blend 1 or 2 terms in the question into a CTA. If that doesn't really make sense, here's an example. I'd love to get your thoughts on what the terms greatest experiences and quietest moments mean to you. Let me know in the comments below. That is a specific version of the generic. Don't forget to leave a comment. I've used the generic CTA as a foundation to then build a more specific one that's tailored to the content of my post. Another point, thank the reader for the time they've taken to read your post. For example, thanks a bunch for making it to the end of this post. One more key takeaway, consider incorporating an aspect of your activate in the introduction in your CTA. Example, let me know how you got through a hard time in the comments below. In the introduction for this example, I said, I'd like you to recall a time where you were feeling shitty. Done. You've just completed the last lesson on interpretive texts. Once you've completed the activities for this lesson, you have studied an entire text type. Big up. Where you go after this lesson depends on your text type preferences. Regardless of what those preferences are, you have just made a big leap towards completing this module. Congratulations once again. And enjoy finishing off the blog post or blog posts that you've been working on for the activities for the last few lessons. I shall see you in the next lesson. Until then, keep it simple.